What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the latest biopic about one of the most iconic stars in all of music, and that movie is called Bob Marley, One Love. Directed by Reinaldo Marcus Green, who wrote this film alongside Terrence Winter, Frank E. Flowers, and Zach Balin. This film stars people like Kingsley Ben-Adir, Lashana Lynch, James Norton, Anthony Welsh, Tosin Cole, and many, many more. So when I first heard we were getting a Bob Marley movie, I was incredibly excited. When it comes to talking about music here on the channel, which I've done sparingly over the years, I've mainly mentioned that I'm a ginormous fan of rock and roll and its various subgenres, most notably heavy metal and some of the heavier music. But I like to kind of say that my taste in music is fairly bipolar. I have one big playlist that I listen to on Spotify that can range from all sorts of genres: heavy metal, rap, hip-hop, reggae, pop, whatever the case may be. But one of my favorite reggae artists, without a doubt, and I think that's the case for most people, is definitely Bob Marley and the Wailers. I love their music, and anytime my music goes from something super heavy into Bob Marley, I'm always having a great time. And I've always really enjoyed his message of peace, love, and unity. And like most brilliant individuals, especially when it comes to music over the years, he had a checkered story, and I was very curious to see how they were going to focus this movie, because biopics are kind of a weird balancing act, right? You're trying to fit a whole person's career or life into an hour and 45 minutes, an hour and 30, 2 hours, whatever the case may be. In the case of this film, an hour and 44. So I was really curious to see how they were going to kind of balance telling his story, what was going to be embellished, and what was going to be essentially taken out of his story. But I, was given a little bit more hope as we went into the film, and the movie opened with a message from Ziggy Marley, one of his sons, essentially giving his ringing endorsement of the film, saying that as one of the producers of the film, he was, able to be on the set of this film on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the film did what it needed to evoke his dad's spirit and message. And also, once I first saw the trailer for this film and I saw that Kingsley Ben-Adir was going to be playing Bob Marley, I kind of scratched my head a little bit, wondering why they didn't cast somebody who was actually a Jamaican actor. But after having seen the film, I thought he did an incredible job in the role, just 100% evoking the spirit of who Bob Marley was. And if you've ever seen any of the interviews and various videos of Bob Marley, I do think that Kingsley Ben-Adir did a really great job in the role. Outside of a couple of moments where his accent maybe sounded a little bit off, and some of the other actors who you could tell were not from the islands kind of having these moments where the accent wasn't perfect, it was nice to see a cast that was predominantly from Jamaica when it came down to playing those characters, giving an authenticity across the board when it came to the accents. I'm sure there are some nitpicks from people who are actually from the islands that can pick out more than me, but as somebody who grew up in Miami and grew up around a lot of close friends who were all from the islands and spending time around their family, it's something that I'm a little bit more used to. I'm a little bit more used to being around people who are speaking patois, so being able to watch this film and follow along with what's going on and recognize that the accent sounded truly authentic, I thought really gave this film an authenticity. Now, to avoid kind of spoiling things for people who are not familiar with Bob Marley's story, even though there are countless documentaries that are out there, and if you're a fan, you probably already know his story, I'm not going to get too deep into all the events that take place here, because again, I do want to take into consideration that these biopics a lot of times are made with the intention to introduce people to the story of these said individuals. And in the case of Bob Marley, if you are not familiar with his story, then I won't give too many details. But this movie opens up in the mid 1970s amidst a lot of violence. There are two political parties that are essentially going head to head, and they're on the brink of civil war in Jamaica. And so now, amidst all of this, Bob Marley, who has essentially made a name for himself in Jamaica mostly, but hasn't become the worldwide success just yet, is planning to do a peace concert, and because of this, he's put himself and those around him at risk of harm or death, simply because of how much violence is happening in Jamaica at this time. And throughout the course of the film, he would have to face adversity, deal with his own personal demons and struggles, deal with relationship issues with his wife Rita, who's played by Lashana Lynch in this film. I think the two of them, both Kingsley Ben-Adir and Lashana Lynch, do an incredible job in this film as those two individuals. And throughout the course of the film, he just has to do everything he can to get his message of peace, love, and unity in his music out into the world, dealing with some struggles along the way. And I think the first half of this film is absolutely excellent. I found that it did a great job of evoking the spirit of Bob Marley and who he was, his message, and I think that Kingsley Ben-Adir did a phenomenal job in the role. I felt like he really must have studied the movements and the mannerisms of Bob Marley. And as the movie was going on, even though he didn't look like Bob Marley to me initially, I bought into him as Bob Marley as the movie went on, which I think is the only thing you could really hope for when it comes to a movie like this. Now, one of my biggest gripes, I would say, is as we moved into the second half of the film, they start to kind of dip their toes into some of the, anger issues he had in moments, some of the struggles he was dealing with at times, maybe some of the demons that were kind of struggling with him, maybe some infidelity he had going on. And I think this is where the film started to get a little bit messy. The first half of the film does a great job of just giving you what you need to know about him, about his past when he was younger, giving us some flashbacks, but most notably setting the path forward for what he was going to be and what his message and his overall, kind of love and unity, peace message was going to be all about. But as we get to the latter half of the film, it tries to tackle a bunch of different things he had going on that were complicating the situation. And I do think, like I said before, it's a weird balancing act, right? You have a biopic that's taking years of somebody's life and shoving it into a nearly 2-hour movie. And so I think in the latter half of the film, there are some slower moments that are trying to hone in on some of that maybe killed the pacing just a little bit, but also kind of had some of these moments kind of being breezed over, and a lot of times, not oftentimes, really giving the full picture. Now, I am fairly familiar with the story of Bob Marley. I've watched many documentaries in the past, but like a lot of biopics, I'm sure there were moments in here that were embellished when it came to the story, as well as parts of his story that were also omitted. There were definitely elements I know were omitted, and I'm sure there were more that I don't even know about that were omitted, again, because you only have an hour and 45 minutes to tell the story. But in the end, I genuinely found this to be a well-acted movie that mainly focuses on Bob Marley. I think if you're going in trying to get a story that kind of tells this full story of those all around him, not only Bob Marley but also the Wailers, the only other real character that gets a whole lot of screen time here that really is expanded upon is Rita Marley, his wife, who is played by Lashana Lynch. But even her character is kind of relegated to key moments in his life throughout his success and some of the struggles he was dealing with later on in his life, more so than actually being a full fleshed out character on her own that you actually are able to follow. This movie is far more interested in telling the story of Bob Marley and honing in on some key moments of his career, which on one hand did unfortunately leave things feeling a little bit choppy at times, a little bit messy. We're jumping around to different places and jumping in time at times, which does oftentimes kind of kill the flow of the movie. But quite frankly, those are fairly minor gripes for me in a movie that I genuinely found to be incredibly well acted, very well shot, very well directed across the board. I really love the inclusion of all the Bob Marley music in this film, not only when he was actually rehearsing things and playing things at concerts, but also just being utilized for some of the various montages throughout the course of the film. As a big fan of Bob Marley and the Wailers, I was very happy to hear that music, very well kind of put together throughout the course of the film, and just on an overall basis, I thought that this movie just evoked the spirit of what Bob Marley was all about. I felt like that peace, love, and unity message was at the center of this film. And even though I think that there are sections of the latter half of the film that are a little bit slow and a little bit messy, I ultimately found it to be a really engaging and interesting time that has a powerful message and has a powerful lead performance from Kingsley Ben-Adir, who really blew me away. I thought he did an incredible job. I was a little bit, questionable on him as Bob Marley, but as the film progressed, he really sold me as the character, and I was really impressed with the authenticity across the board when it came to all the acting, all of the dialogue, and the patois. It was definitely at times, I can tell, dumbed down, or at least made a little bit more accessible for people who maybe don't understand patois. As somebody who's been around a lot of Jamaicans in my life, there are times where if you're not familiar with it and you don't know how to speak patois or understand what a lot of the words are, it can be hard to understand. And while this film does have moments like that I did appreciate, there was a lot of it that you can tell they were trying to make it as accessible for people who were coming in from the outside. But again, I think specifically when it comes to Kingsley Ben-Adir, if you've seen interviews of Bob Marley, I thought he did a really great job of replicating his voice and his mannerisms throughout the course of the film. And I think with him being the center character in this movie, primarily focusing on Bob Marley, that's really what you want. And overall, I thought this movie did what it needed to do. I had a really great time with it. I think, whether you like it or not, it's going to depend on your taste of biopics and also your taste of music. But I think undeniably, it tells a story of a man with a message who had his own personal demons that at times are breezed over in this film, but ultimately was able to, spread, and still to this day, a message of peace, love, and unity. So that's going to be my thoughts on Bob Marley, One Love. Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Did you find it to be middle of the road? Are you a fan of Bob Marley? Or did you go into this as somebody who was open to, kind of learning about him? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.